thing billowing, bursting forth with the power of 10 billion butterfly sneezes.
This is Wine, Money, and Song. And if you're interested in wine and you want to learn about the best values in wine, please subscribe. So talking about memorable wines, and I came across this story back in the 70s. The New York Times had a magazine on Sunday. It was called the New York Times Sunday Magazine. And for the first time, they had a weekly wine article. And it was written by Frank Prial. And Frank Prial was an Irish guy who did hard stories, basically. But he had an interest in wine, so he was the editor of the living section of the Sunday magazine. And part of the living section was his wine article. And Prial tells a story about him coming home from the Korean War, which I found very, very interesting. But to put Prial in perspective first, he was one of the first. He was a pioneer in wine writers, especially in New York and writing for the New York Times. Everyone on Wednesdays, he would write a wine article, and all of the stores and the advertisers wanted to be next to the wine article. All the big stores advertised next to it. And I always bought the Times on Wednesday to read Frank Prial's wine article on Wednesdays, because he would talk about wines, and once he put it in, they would sell. So he got momentum going, and he got everyone interested in wines. And that was beginning of the revolution, the wine revolution in America. And he was a big part of it. But he tells the story. He's had thousands of wines, great wines in his life. And someone asked him, what was the most memorable wine he's ever had? And he explains it that, believe it or not, I've been to many chateaus, I've been many domains in Burgundy, and I've been to Germany. But the one wine experience that meant the most for me, and it tasted so good, is when I got out of the Coast Guard and I was coming home from the Korean War. I was on an aircraft carrier, and I was going underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And if you think about an aircraft carrier, they're the size of like 2 or 3 football fields. They're massive. And on board, on the deck, one of the Navy guys came up, and he had a jug of cheap California wine with him. And he's handing it out to everyone. So Frank Prial, this was before he was a wine writer, obviously. He took a glass, took the jug of inexpensive California wine, poured it in there, and he's watching San Francisco come into light. And he's leaving behind the war in Korea. And anyone who goes away to war, they don't know if they're really coming back. And the nightmares and all the doubts, and all of a sudden, your life is all of a sudden, the sun is rising, and you're free again, and you're going to live a good life. You have a chance. And he's riding in on the aircraft carrier, and he sees San Francisco coming in, and he's made it. He's drinking this very inexpensive California jug wine, and he's just, he said it was just like nectar, that it tasted so marvelous, and it tasted like freedom. It tasted like liberty. And no matter what he had in the future, he would always go back to that wine, that it opened up his whole life that he had ahead of his, and it just tasted so fine. And Prial went on to be the most influential wine writer in New York, and columnist, very, very important. He drew a lot of advertisers there. But I remember on Wednesdays running out and reading the wine column that he had. But his experience, and he still recounted it until he died, that cheap jug wine was the best wine he'd ever had, because all those troubles and those nightmares in his life were left behind, and this was going to be his life. And I think that's a great wine story.